In October 1962, the world stood on the brink of nuclear war. For 13 tense days, the United States and the Soviet Union confronted each other in a dangerous standoff. This was the Cuban Missile Crisis, a chilling episode that revealed the terrifying potential of the Cold War to turn hot. The fate of the world hung in the balance as leaders on both sides grappled with unimaginable consequences. The crisis unfolded not on a battlefield, but in the shadowy realms of diplomacy and espionage, where every word and gesture carried the weight of potential annihilation. The story of the Cuban Missile Crisis is a reminder of the fragility of peace and the importance of clear communication in a world armed with nuclear weapons. It is a story of how close we came to disaster and how, through a combination of courage, restraint, and luck, we managed to step back from the abyss. To understand the Cuban Missile Crisis, we must first journey back to the aftermath of World War II. The wartime alliance between the United States and the Soviet Union had dissolved, replaced by suspicion and mistrust. The two superpowers, each possessing nuclear weapons, became locked in an ideological struggle for global dominance. This was the Cold War, a period of geopolitical tension that cast a long shadow over the world. On one side stood the United States, a capitalist democracy promoting freedom and individual liberty. On the other side stood the Soviet Union, a communist state advocating for a classless society and the collective good. Both sides sought to expand their spheres of influence, leading to proxy wars in Korea, Vietnam, and other corners of the globe. The Cuban Missile Crisis brought this simmering conflict to a boil, threatening to engulf the entire world in nuclear fire. In the summer of 1962, American intelligence agencies began picking up troubling signals. Soviet ships were steaming towards Cuba, a small island nation just 90 miles off the coast of Florida. These ships, it turned out, carried a deadly cargo nuclear-armed missiles capable of striking targets across the United States. For President John F. Kennedy and his advisors, the discovery was a shock. The presence of Soviet missiles in Cuba was a direct threat to American security, upsetting the delicate balance of power. The United States faced a stark choice: respond forcefully and risk a wider conflict, or do nothing and allow the Soviet Union to establish a dangerous foothold in the Western Hemisphere. The stakes were incredibly high, and the world watched with bated breath as the crisis unfolded. Kennedy, after days of agonizing deliberation, decided on a course of action. He would not tolerate the presence of Soviet missiles in Cuba, but he also wanted to avoid an all-out war. His solution was a naval blockade, a ring of American warships surrounding Cuba to prevent any further Soviet shipments from reaching the island. Kennedy announced this quarantine, as he called it, in a televised address to the nation on October 22, 1962. Kennedy's speech was a defining moment of the crisis. He spoke with calm resolve, outlining the threat posed by the Soviet missiles and the steps he was taking to protect American interests. He also appealed directly to the Soviet Union, urging Premier Nikita Khrushchev to withdraw the missiles and avert a catastrophic conflict. The world held its breath, waiting to see how the Soviet Union would respond. Section 5, Khrushchev's ultimatum, a compromise offered. The Soviet Union, initially caught off guard by the American response, reacted with defiance. Khrushchev denounced the blockade as an act of aggression and warned that any attack on Soviet ships would be met with force. The situation seemed to be spiraling out of control, with both sides digging in their heels. However, behind the scenes, a different kind of conversation was taking place. Khrushchev, recognizing the danger of the situation, sent a message to Kennedy proposing a compromise. The Soviet Union would dismantle the missiles in Cuba, he said, if the United States promised not to invade the island. This offer, while seemingly a way out of the crisis, came with a catch. Khrushchev also demanded that the United States remove its nuclear missiles from Turkey, a NATO ally bordering the Soviet Union. The world watched and waited, hoping for a peaceful resolution. Section 6, the world holds its breath, back channels and breakthroughs. The Kennedy administration faced a difficult choice. Agreeing to Khrushchev's demands would be seen as a sign of weakness, but rejecting them could lead to war. Through a combination of back-channel diplomacy and tense negotiations, a solution began to emerge. Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General and the President's brother, met secretly with Soviet Ambassador Anatoly Dobrynin to hammer out the details of an agreement. The agreement, reached after days of intense pressure, involved a delicate dance of concessions. Publicly, the United States would agree not to invade Cuba, while privately Kennedy promised to remove the missiles from Turkey at a later date. The Soviet Union, in turn, would dismantle the missiles in Cuba under United Nations supervision. This secret deal, negotiated in the shadows of the crisis, would prove to be the key to averting a global catastrophe. Section 7. Averting Armageddon, the Resolution and its Aftermath. On October 28, 1962, Khrushchev announced the Soviet Union's decision to dismantle the missiles in Cuba. The news was met with relief and jubilation around the world. The crisis was over, and the world had stepped back from the brink. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a watershed moment in the Cold War. It demonstrated the terrifying consequences of nuclear brinkmanship and the importance of communication and diplomacy in managing international relations. In the aftermath of the crisis, both the United States and the Soviet Union took steps to reduce tensions and prevent future confrontations. A direct hotline was established between Washington and Moscow to facilitate direct communication between the leaders of the two superpowers. The following year, both countries signed the Limited Test Ban Treaty, which banned nuclear weapons tests in the atmosphere, underwater, and outer space. While the Cold War continued for many years, the Cuban Missile Crisis served as a stark reminder of the need to find peaceful solutions to international disputes. Section 8. The Long Shadow of the Crisis: Lessons and Legacies. The Cuban Missile Crisis, though a half-century behind us, continues to hold valuable lessons for today's world. It reminds us that even in the darkest of times, diplomacy and dialogue can prevail over aggression and force. The crisis also highlights the importance of clear communication, empathy, and a willingness to compromise in resolving international disputes. Perhaps most importantly, the Cuban Missile Crisis serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of nuclear weapons. The fact that the fate of the world hung in the balance for 13 days should give us all pause and strengthen our resolve to work towards a future free from these weapons of mass destruction. The lessons of the Cuban Missile Crisis are as relevant today as they were in 1962. Section 9. A World Still on Edge. Echoes of the Crisis Today. As we look out at the world today, we see echoes of the Cuban Missile Crisis in the rising tensions between nuclear-armed states. The threat of nuclear war, though perhaps less prominent in the public consciousness than it was during the Cold War, remains a very real danger. The lessons of the Cuban Missile Crisis, therefore, are not merely historical artifacts, but rather urgent reminders of the need for vigilance and responsible leadership on the world stage. The Cuban Missile Crisis reminds us that the choices we make today have far-reaching consequences. It is up to us, the inheritors of this perilous legacy, to learn from the past and work towards a future where diplomacy and dialogue triumph over threats and intimidation. The future of our planet may very well depend on it.